So I've gone and seen Logan twice now. Now, along with the rest of America, I was genuinely surprised by just how good Logan was. I don't tend to say this a lot, but this movie could be genuinely great, even. I did not expect this. Now, I'm not going to talk about the actual quality of the movie, because that would take way too much time, and this is designed to be a quickie video anyway. But I want to talk a little bit about my theater-going experience, because it was one of the best I've had in recent time. It was just genuinely great. Now, I'm going to explain that a bit. It wasn't the movie itself, but the theater-going experience that I'm going to talk about. Like, what was it being in the theater with all these people? Now, as I said, I've seen it twice. First time I saw it Thursday evening with my friend, with Xavier, and it was a crowd, a bunch of nerds, because, nerds go and see it early, because they really want to see it, and they want to avoid spoilers and all that. Blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, on yesterday, I went and saw it with my family in just a general screening with the general public. And they were both very different audiences. Now, I was genuinely surprised by how much this movie didn't follow the conventions of the superhero genre, of comic book genre in general. Now, allow me to illustrate that. In the Fanboy Nerd screening Thursday night, they played the teaser before the movie instead of after, so they're calling it a pre-credit scene. And that was kind of funny, because they got out all of that right at the beginning, so they don't have to talk about any of that later on. And there was no end credit scene, and then I was sitting in a theater full of nerds, and pretty much everybody was sitting there in the theater, not leaving, waiting for the end credit scene that never came. And then there was this giant when it came across the whole theater when there was no end credit scene. It was so good. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my screening on Saturday, because that was a more interesting one. Of course, that might have been because I had already seen the movie and I knew what to expect, so I was paying a little bit more attention to the periphery. But what I gathered was pretty interesting. So, if you've seen the movie, and if you haven't, I'm going to spoil it for you now, so be warned. There's a scene about 2/3 of the way through where you think it's a dramatic scene where Professor X is remembering his past and what he did in Westchester, having a seizure and killing all the X-Men. And that's a pretty shocking moment. And it's very dramatic because he's realizing what he did and he's filling himself with remorse. And then suddenly, turns out it's not Logan, it's X-24, or the clone of Logan, and then they stabs him right in the chest. And then, in that moment, when I was watching the movie in the theater on Saturday, everybody went, "Oh!" Or, something similar. And that moment was just so electric because nobody had been expecting that. I mean, if you've been watching the superhero genre over the past decade, you know that nobody really dies anymore. Like, Captain America Civil War, nobody died. In the age of Disney superhero movies, nobody dies. Which is ironic, considering that the first thing that they did in the new Star Wars movies is killed off Han Solo. But I'm getting tired of the superhero genre because it's just so samey, and there's no stakes in any of these movies because all the main characters are going to survive. But then this moment happens, and I was in a screening, there were kids there. There were people, like kids and families and people who don't normally go to see these movies just because they thought, oh, it's Wolverine and the X-Men, oh, cool, I'll go see it, oh, it's gonna be so much fun. And then, it's not. It was so shocking. Like, the opening action scene where he's beating up all those Mexican robbers by the side of the highway, and he's just getting beaten to death, and the claw doesn't pull out. It's so gritty and violent and disgusting. And then everybody was going, ugh, in my screening on Saturday, and I just thought, oh, I love this so much. I enjoyed it so much because everybody else was so shocked by what was going on. And that made it worthwhile. That made my day. Because nobody wanted this sort of thing to happen. It was just like, oh, I want to see more Wolverine slashing people. But I don't want to see the blood or the violence. And if that was what James Mangold, the director, was going for, I applaud you. I applaud him wholeheartedly. Because it was so vividly exciting to go into an audience full of kids and families and people, average moviegoers, who are expecting another silly comic book movie, or maybe even something like Deadpool, where it's a bit raunchy, but it's not really all that scary or violent. And then they go in and see this, where Patrick Stewart is killed just like that, and he's just dead. All these vivid, brutal moments that you wouldn't expect in this movie, but he had the guts to make them happen. And I think, good job, because in that theater, people were realizing that comic book movies don't have to be what you're expecting them to be. They don't have to be sanitized and for the family and for everybody. There can be a bit of an edge to these movies. There can be a grit and there's a visceral quality to them that isn't present. And that was worth seeing it a second time, just to be in the theater with all these people who weren't expecting to be challenged in this movie. It's a very challenging movie just to watch all this violence and grotesqueness going on. But I think it was totally worth it. Just to see those people thinking, just for those few moments of Professor X dying. Anything could happen. What? That was worth it on its own. Now, I'm hoping that those moviegoers will go home on their own and try out some new things and maybe expand their horizons a little bit because of what they saw, but let's be honest, I don't think they will. They'll just say, oh, it was gory, I didn't like it. Then they'll go and watch one of the other X-Men movies instead. Or maybe they'll watch a Marvel movie instead. Oh, I don't trust those Fox X-Men movies anymore because they're too violent. But that was a pretty incredible moment there, James Mangold. You pulled the old switcheroo. You thought we were going in to see an X-Men movie, but then we saw a Wolverine movie for the first time. I'll see you next time. I'm David. Bye.